Now, just to introduce to those of you who TiiQu is, we are a technological startup building with the ambition to build a new trust mechanism. And the reason why we care about knowledge sharing and sessions like the one we are having today is that it's only by enabling everyone to share knowledge and to make a knowledge trusted and trustworthy that we can succeed then in having for everyone a knowledge-based identity. What we do, what we are is we are a network of trusted tribes, and today is the tribe of sustainable agriculture. We are a platform for knowledge sharing, like these TiiQu talks, and we are a set of tools that use the blockchain technology to convert pieces of truth into immutable records, and that everyone can share a trusted identity through knowledge-based proofs collected upon the time. So today is particularly interesting because we are discussing a sustainable agriculture, and we are discussing the ecological ecosystem that is behind a future of sustainable products, especially food products. And the ecosystem concept was something we addressed in our white paper back in 2018, talking most importantly about trustless ecosystems, so systems that are empowered by an underlying technology able to facilitate trust. So the interesting thing is that today we have two speakers who will be presenting their journey from the transformation of land to the use of tools for transforming waste into food. And then we have two presenters who will be talking about the supply chain and most importantly, a transparent supply chain empowered with blockchain. And our last speaker, Gary Spencer, will be talking about how the entire ecosystem, agricultural ecosystem, can talk with the external world and engage both investors and consumers. So it will be a full journey across the entire ecosystem. And yes, thank you very much for being here. I would invite everyone, please, to post their questions into the chat. We will have a Q&A sessions at the end of talks. We'll have a couple of minutes after each talk for eventually asking questions to the specific speakers. Otherwise, for more general questions, we will discuss them at the end of the full presentations. So without any further delay, I would introduce and move the conversation to our first speaker, Adriano Ravasio from Simbiosi. Adriano, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you too. Okay. First of all, I would like to thank you for your patience. I'm not used to speaking English. I will do my best. My name is Adriano Ravasio. I'm an agronomist, and I work as an agri-service manager in Simbiosi. That is a society based in Italy, near Milan. And today I want to talk about our company experience in sustainable land use management. And until a few weeks ago, before the current corporate merger, our company name was Neururale, which is a beautiful name for me that understands a different vision of the management of an agricultural territory. And Neururale means new rural, and rural area is the place that provides life to the urban system, in which not only food is made, but also where the natural resources used by industrial and agricultural processes are generated also. And it is the place able to transform urban waste into energy and fertilizers. But it's not just this, it's also the place that hosts biodiversity. Biodiversity plays an important role in the functioning of numerous biological cycles. So we can say rural area is very important for the long-term functioning of the entire system. And therefore, aware of the services that a rural system must be able to maintain, we ask ourselves if the territory where we live and where we cultivate is able to support and regenerate the resources it needs. So we ask, is it sustainable in the long term, or is just able to provide only food, and by the way, with a decreasing potential and an increasing inputs? We note that we are able to manage the most important limited resources for agricultural processes, that is the soil, in which many biological cycles are carried out. Loss of fertility means for us desertification. And this is what we are seeing also in our soils, where we are less than 1% of organic matter. Especially that happens in the areas of Southern Europe. This is happening. So we are losing a lot of soil fertility. And so what we are doing is we are started doing what we see in the picture of fowl. We started doing minimum tillage. No plowing is done anymore in our lands, and that helps saving fuel and increase carbon fixation. And what happened? We see in the last 20 years growing of organic matter and fertility. We measure it with a proxy that you can see. We see the cation, sorry, I can't see the slide, the cation exchange capacity increased by over 150% in 20 years. And as I said, this is a proxy of soil fertility. But all these practices are just common agriculture good practices. So what we have done, my colleagues have done in the past. The first experiments in the environmental regeneration took place in 1996 on 500 hectares, where it was decided to see how long it would take the ancestral biodiversity of the territory to recreate itself. So wetlands, woods, swamps, typical of the territory, have been recreated. So different habitats for species with different ecologies. To increase the number of birds, insects, and other mammals, species that you can see, show the success of the experiments in just 20 years. The tests that started in 1996 led to the choice of an integration of environmental regeneration in the context of agricultural production. Through what we have called environment field margin, we have brought nature into the fields. We have dedicated like 10% of our surface to these to the environment, and this what give to us. First of all, a paradigm shift. So from food producing soil to environment producing soil, and also we keep food, of course, producing soil. So you can see in the slide just some benefits of these environmental margins. So natural absorption of CO2, stimulation of soil fertility, enhanced biodiversity, wildlife corridors, and so on. And what is the economic sustainability of this choice? Maybe we can talk later. And this is a map, okay, of our district, how we called. So we have about more than 1,500 hectares, 20% of these dedicated to the environment. And for the non-economic benefits that enhancement, there is the enhancement of the landscape, and so the enhancement of rural buildings. The right picture that is the place where we work, and this beauty that is, we can say, that is created by zero, can also be exploited thanks to the various events that can be hosted, like the Eco Marathon. There is a photo, okay, from a drone in the picture below, and so events can be hosted, increase also of our commercial value of the food product. So we sell rice, and we know that now we can sell with a higher price because we sell it like a sustainable product. Here we can see other images from our lands, and from a perspective of a circular economy, the absurdity was to see our soil constantly losing organic substance on the one hand, and on the other hand, many food industry literally burning the organic substance rich of carbon that there is carbon in the waste produced by the food production that were burned. So what we decided was to use the nutrients contained in the food production. We use mainly carbon-based fertilizer, which come from the food chain. This is how we put these fertilizer in the soil, so we can inject it into the soil, so we can reduce energy consumption and pollution and preserving fertility, because this is a liquid, sort of liquid fertilizer. And okay, and so I come back to the question of the evening: can sustainable agriculture solve the problems of the food supply chains? And the answer is, if we consider the agricultural practices linked to a good management, as the reduction of pesticide use, or the reduction of fertilizers, or just growing cover crops and so on, I think it's just too late, and we can only say that we are less impactful. But if we consider crops not just for simple food product, but the end result of an intense work of collaboration between man, animals, and the plant world and microorganisms. Yes, if we consider it also all the opportunities given by rural contexts in addition to food, then we have made an efficient system. So this is the possibility to fix also the food industry. So thank you for your attention, and I hope that somebody may contact us. If you have any question, I am very pleased to answer it.
Well, we do have a number of questions. I invite, instead of reading them, I would invite Michael, who asked 3 questions, to, well, kindly show up and ask your questions, Michael.
You surprised me, but okay. Thank you very much for the opportunity. My questions are generally 3. First one is whether you would be able to realize the project, because this is a long-term project, yes, without the financing of state or any other investors. This is the number 1. The number 2, whether you have considered to use biochar or even the liquid biochar as a fertilizer. Number 3 is whether you are using already now wormeries to process the food waste and at the same time to generate the fertilizer, the natural fertilizer. So.
Well, we do have, sorry, Adriano, I cut you just to say that we have just a couple of minutes. So just answer to the first question and then we take the others for the end. Sorry, Michael, I didn't expect, we just give the place first to everyone to talk and then we answer to other questions. But the first one, Michael, if you want, sorry, Adriano, if you want to go for the first one, please.
Okay, first of all, new community agricultural programs from Europe target the agricultural sector toward the use of land for environmental purposes and give payments for the production of ecosystem services for the community as a reduction of pollution, increase of biodiversity conservation, and prevent soil erosion. So yes, the answer is yes. We received some funds from European Union for doing this by the CAP. Okay.
But the question was if you would have been able to do that without the funds.
It would be very, very hard. Yes.
So money is the first thing. Thank you very much, Adriano. Thank you. Sorry again, Michael, we take your other questions a little bit later. I would ask to Adriano to kindly stop sharing.
Great, sounds good. I can see my slides okay?
Yeah.
Perfect, great. Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone. My name's Chris Bunio. I'm the CEO of a company called Theory Mesh. And we're really focused on the food supply chain. So we're focused on thinking about everything from the field to food processing to the consumer and how we connect all these different pieces together. To give you a little bit of what's happening in the industry in terms of technology, we've seen over the last few years what I would call a data explosion in the food industry. So if we think about all of the information that's available coming from the farm today, there's a nearly unlimited amount of, there's some other sharing happening there. I will flip back. Hold on 1 second. We're seeing a massive amount of new data coming through from the farm. So if we think about autonomous tractors, any of the yield sensing systems, IoT being deployed to the farms, we see massive amounts of data now being collected on the farm itself. And this comes through in terms of new systems that are being developed every day. So we can see robotics coming into play. We see satellite imagery being used. So farm data is really being expanded. The interesting thing about the farm data today is that a lot of what is being done is focused on yield. So it's really focused on how do we increase the yield per acre coming from those farms. If you think about what that means, it means that for a given amount of land and input, we're trying to have the maximum growth. So it's really about maximizing the growing patterns today. Some of the things that will lead to is, in some cases, processes that are maybe less sustainable than they should be as we start thinking about optimizing around yield. So we need to think about how we can connect that farming and field data to the ultimate goal of driving sustainability. But farms don't operate in a vacuum. So farms operate to produce food, which goes into the food supply chain. And where we've really focused as a company is thinking about how we can connect those dots and then carry that value forward. So as food comes off of the field, so if you're producing grains or if you're producing livestock, that typically goes into some kind of food processing step. And that food processing step has its own characteristics. So when we think about taking grain and turning it into bread, each step in that process has somebody selling a crop from the farm to a food processor. And at that food processing level, there are different activities that are undertaken there to go through that food processing. And what we see through each of those different steps is different opportunities for us to actually implement sustainable practices. So from the farm side, understanding how we can maximize yield without impacting sustainability. And a lot of the work that Simbiosi is doing fits very nicely into that category. At the food processing stage, we're really looking to maximize output without introducing waste into the process and making sure that we've got the nutritional profile that consumers need. And then at the consumer level, consumers are increasingly looking for organic, sustainable, traceable food. So we're seeing more and more, and particularly through the pandemic, we're seeing more and more consumers thinking more clearly about what they do, how they eat their food, and how that continues on. So the farms today that kind of start this food chain are really there to grow and to start the food production process. What we're seeing is a big shift towards thinking about farms in the context of carbon. So carbon sequestration and ensuring that we're reducing the carbon footprint of farms. So farms, we know, can be very effective carbon sinks if they're the right practices. One of the big questions that gets asked is, how do we make sure that farmers are incented to have the right practices? How do we make sure that there's value for them as they're growing their crops or they're growing their product? We do know that data is very important in this space. So data in a number of different ways. On the farm, farmers are really looking to maximize yield. So they're looking at how they can use all the available data to produce a better crop. That data is also valuable to others in the supply chain. So if we think about new regulations coming into play in the US and the EU, they're going to be focused on sustainability reporting, and the top corporations in Europe and in the US are going to have to show that they can back up their sustainability claims with real data. Part of that data for food companies comes from those initial farm inputs. So if we have someone producing low carbon grain because they've been reducing their nitrogen use, they've been sequestering more carbon, it's going to be very important for upstream food companies to be able to get that information. And we need to make sure that that's monetizable. And then sustainability is really about the whole supply chain. So we don't have sustainability without thinking about what happens across the entire food system. If we produce a crop in Canada, ship that crop to the US for processing, move it to China for packaging and bring it back to Canada, obviously we've destroyed a lot of the benefits that we would get from sustainable farming. So we need to think about the food industry as a whole and think about the sustainable practices on the farm as the first step and the foundation for being able to actually create a sustainable food system. What we've been seeing and where we're very focused is thinking about how do technologies come into play to support this. One of the key ones that we're working on today is blockchain. So blockchain in the case that we're talking about here is really about being able to create a public ledger that can have information which is traceable and transparent and can do that across multiple participants in a supply chain. So in that case, what we really want to do and really want to see is the ability to have that record keeping and production data that comes from the farm, integrated, validated, and certified so that it can be integrated with the supply chain. And we can see that farm information being supplied in a way that can be consumed by others where there's value. Now, creating value always implies the movement of money. So we need to make sure that there's a way to monetize these things as we make this more transparent. In the perfect scenario, if we think about a container of milk as an example, dairy comes under a lot of fire for having a high carbon footprint. We can think about crops that are grown sustainably that then feed a cow, which has been raised with the right genetics to reduce the methane emissions, the right additives to reduce those methane emissions, and then further up the supply chain using local production and other methods to reduce the overall footprint. We want to be able to show across that supply chain that we actually do have low carbon or low impact products. And this is where the industry has been struggling for quite some time to show how this all works. The monetization aspect is important, and some of the key things that we're seeing that are really going to help to drive that behavior. The first, of course, is carbon credits. This is a little of the wild, wild west. Every country has a different scheme. In countries, every area has a different scheme, and there aren't a lot of globally accepted standards here. So we're seeing that as a potential opportunity for us, but definitely something that needs more work, and especially when it comes to the long-term value of what carbon credits are going to create. The second thing is really looking at product certification and how do we add value. One of the key things that I was hearing from our first presenter was that as they've got their new practices in place, they're able to actually get a premium for those products because of the sustainable practices. So we want to make sure that we're able to back up product claims with data to show that it is actually sustainable and transformative. And then the last piece is really consumer interaction. Consumers today are more aware, they're more open to looking at what products are coming into play. So we want to be able to expose them to the best practices that are being used on those farms to be able to share the good practices, the low carbon aspects, and all of those different things. And as I was reminded by someone the other day, everyone with a phone in their hand can scan a QR code and get information. So we want to make sure that we can work with that as we're sharing information with consumers and make them aware that they can invest themselves by choosing more sustainable products when they have that information. So I'll wrap there. That's my contact details for anyone that would like to reach out. And certainly happy to take a few of the questions in the chat.
Thank you very much, Chris. We have our friend Michael, who is quite active today in asking. Michael, one question, choose one because you have many.
Okay, sorry for that, but you know, my surname is Advice and I'm asking questions. So this is why the people invite me. The question is, did you measure it already, Chris? How much waste did your technology prevent it already?
So we're starting to look at, so we're focused mainly on food production, and where we are seeing already is being able to measure waste along the food supply chain. So we're already starting to see the traceability to say I had this much grain produced. When I went through processing, I lost X amount in that processing step, and then I'm seeing this much come out the other side. So we're already starting to give the feedback on the basics of, this much came from the farm through the chain out to the endpoint. We're building that data set. So I'd say it's over time that we'll see more and more being able to optimize that. But we're in the starting point to be able to show that to our customers, to show them where they've got some food loss and food waste in those spaces. So it's a growing part of the data that we've got.
Okay, thanks a lot. We stay in touch because I have more questions. So we stay in touch. Thanks a lot.
Perfect. Great.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Chris, again. I think we are ready for Zach for your presentation. Let me share, in this case, the screen. Yes. Okay. And let's make it big. Okay. So you just tell me when I should move on, and I will do that, Zach.
Okay, that would be wonderful. Thank you. Grazie mille, Laura, and everybody else for that matter. My name is Zach, and I'm so sorry about this hiccup. I worked all my life for working for oil and gas company. So basically working for linear economy, and now moving over to circular economy. I believe in human capital, and I believe in us as we can do what we can do in order for us to understand how and why we should do. So the question is, what is sustainable approach to fix this food security? How do we go about doing that? If you turn to the next slide, please.
Yeah.
First, we have to understand about the problem. What is the problem right now? Why are we having food security or food supply chain problem? We only have two countries fighting, Ukraine and Russia, and we are having a fertilizer problem. Don't forget about the water footprint and other issues that we will talk about it. So if you take a look at the problem itself, we use 70% of potable water for agriculture. Now I live in Canada, so we have 20% of, potable water. It's not a big problem for us, maybe, but there's a major problem for many other people that you and I know, including California for that matter. So the question remains is that why are our post-farm produce still going to landfill, which is almost 50%? The other question that we have to ask about the landfill stress, which has already gone into overcapacity mode, and that is another place where we're having a greenhouse gas emission coming out of it, that having a direct impact on climate change. At the same time, it is expensive and so on and on, as you can see. So the food security and food supply chain are integral part of sustainability. So what can we do in order to address the regenerative agriculture best practices? That's the number one question that we have to ask ourselves. Next slide, please. Next slide. So recycling solutions for food waste, including A and B, that's post-farm produce, as well as the food scrap. Why can we not create circular economy and food supply chain from those items that we are throwing them away? Why can we not reduce the landfill stress and curb the greenhouse gas that we talked about? Why can we not create an opportunity to providing audit for carbon tax from carbon credit that we earn? Next slide, please. This is one of the simple machine that we have placed in one of those hotel here. It's a small machine where they're having the turnkey solution. It's just something for you to take a look for what the machine really looks like. Next one, please. Now I want you to take a look at this slide, please. I mentioned about stream A, farm produce, as well as I also mentioned about food scrap. If you take a look at farm produce, I'm just using as an example, during the Halloween period, we grow a lot of pumpkins, 1 year a year. We use 70% of the water. Remember all the things that we've talked about. Most of the pumpkins during the Halloween period gets thrown away. We're saying to people, why are we throwing those away? Why can we not make water out of it? Why can we not make biomass that we can make pumpkin bread out of it? The same thing applies for the people who are drinking beer, having the barley, instead of throwing them away, why not we dehydrate those and make a bread out of it? At the same time, if you take a look at the food scrap, we turn them into 100% pathogen-free water. We also use the food scrap for making as a soil amendment. Remember, we talked about the fertilizer prices are going up. and because the war in Ukraine and Russia and so forth. So that is also causing all kinds of problems. So why we cannot make our own soil amendment, and why we cannot use those other items that we can use for fish and poultry feed. So in other words, if you take a look at the benefit itself, from 1 ton of food waste, just one simple 1 ton of food waste, we are having the benefit of 292,000 liters of pathogen-free water per year, with over 160,000 pounds of biomass. Most importantly, we have 365 tons of item not going to the landfill, and of course, the climate change impact and so on. Next slide, please. The market size, who can be our partners? Every one of them can be our partners. If you take a look at the total addressable market, if you take a look at service available market, or a serviceable obtainable market. Next one, please. We have target segment, a target market segment, from food bank to hospitals to supermarket to condo high-rise buildings, and of course the NGOs. We are working with NGOs in Africa. So instead of why we cannot teach them how to catch their own fish rather than giving them fish. At the same time, smart city solution, again, the supply chain for the item that we need to create food security and food supply chain. The item that we are throwing them away from high-rise buildings in Toronto, for example, there's no reason for why it should be thrown away. Why can we not create something that can have a benefit to the mankind as well as to create a food supply chain? Next one, please. Now comes if you go back the previous slide, please. There you go. It's a retrofit. People talked about how much does it cost. It doesn't cost much money to do that. We don't need to have a very high-tech solution. It's a very simple thing. We dehydrate the food and we make something out of it. We don't use any enzyme. It's customized so that every one of us can take care of their own EPR, extended producer responsibility, and every one of us can take care of their own environmental social governance. It is done within 23 hours, so you don't have to wait for a long period of time. And the energy consumption is so little, it's something that we won't have to worry about it. Next slide, please. We provide, in terms of business model, we provide item for machine as we are renting it out, or people can buy it out, and they can also get the full audit for their carbon credits. So the return of investment and social return of investment is absolutely priceless. Next one, please. Now let's talk about our competition or competitors. One of them for us is landfill. So you can imagine the landfill, which is considered to have methane gas, which is considered to be 80 times more lethal than carbon emission. So why are we sending those items to the landfill in the first place? That's the number one question that we should be asking from a social point of view. Next one, please. The second one is a biogas plant. I'm not against biogas plant, but biogas plant cannot create the circular economy, it cannot create the food supply chain as we talked about it, and that's why we're talking about food security and food supply chain. Yes, you can, but not a whole lot as what we need to have. We can't make a bread out of pumpkins that we are throwing them away, for example. The next one, please. Another one is incinerators. That's another area where people have been focusing a lot. Incinerators, as you can see from the graphic chart, again, it does not create food security and food supply chain. Yes, it does have a lot of good advantages, but not something that we are talking about in terms of food supply chain and food security. Next one, please. So if you're looking at water stress and water footprint, I lived in Middle East. Water is precious there. California, you ask them, they will tell you how precious the water is. Let that be a river Po in Italy, or let that be Colorado River. It's all drying up. So we make water out of food waste. As you can see, we work on looking at the opportunity of creating one-time plastic use from food scrap. That's another thing that we can use. At the same time, we're also engaged with the community farming. And on top of that, we do Eco Warrior program for our kids. Next one, please. Just to give you a little bit of slide for what you can see, the flyer. Next one, please. Again, it's a little bit of information about the Z machine. As you can see, it's very simple. Next one, please. As you can see, the only thing that we require from our network, and the reason why we're having this discussion, is for people to understand how and what we can do in order to address the food security and food supply chain. That's what we said is a billion-dollar question. Next one, please. This is a snapshot of the return of investment. As you can see, this is all according to Canadian municipal tipping fee and so on. I'll be more than happy to share that with anyone whoever wishes to have it. Next one, please. Next one, please. Now, I like to focus on this one a little bit, please. Methane gas, as you can see, there are so many other areas that we can also curb methane gas. One of them, of course, oil and gas, 43%, agriculture, 29%, and other 28%. So we have to ask ourselves, what is other? What is other that we know we're talking about? So if you and I can work on creating food supply chain from agriculture product that we are throwing them away, and instead of going to the landfill, if you can take care of that 29% plus 28%, that's a lot of good percentage of item not going to the landfill, causing the methane gas that you and I, we talked about it for the climate change impact that we are facing. Next one, please. In conclusion, all I can say, if you're looking at a smart living solution, I guess this is one of them. Thank you very much. Next one, please. And you have all my details. Next one. There's something which I also like to share with you. We have started something called Grow Your Own Food initiative sometime back in the UAE with Dubai Municipality. We were the knowledge partner. This is basically to do with the community farming. And at the same time, we're also working with the Eco Warrior program from kindergarten to industry, so the kids can understand the importance about the food and be able to appreciate the food that they learn, how to respect the food as well. Next one, please. Thank you very much. That's all I can say. Thank you. I'll be more than happy to take any question. Anybody can write to me directly, and I'll be more than happy to answer them at any given time.
Thank you very much, Zach. We have already a couple of questions. Minor, do you want to say your word? Minor, are you with us? Otherwise, Michael, do you want to go first?
Hello, Zach. I will ask minor question generally. Is asking, what about halal? So if the processing is whether you can be with the requirement of halal food.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, if you're talking about halal food in terms of the religious approach for it, if you're putting a meat or fish, so instead of throwing away those items, We can dehydrate any of those. We don't do the slaughtering of the halal process per se, but the food that's coming out of it is definitely is halal if the slaughter has been done in a halal way. So in other word, Michael, whatever you put in, that's what you will get the end result.
My question was, what is the smallest and biggest machine?
Okay. Since we customize, since we try to help people for the EPR and ESG initiative, so we try to focus on from anywhere from 50 kilogram machine all the way up to 1,090 kilogram machine. And all of the cycle is done within 23 hours.
That's interesting. Thanks a lot.
Great. Thank you very much, Zach. It was very, very interesting. And Michael also, because you have always very good questions. So we are now to the ecosystem view. Gary, is your turn. Can you share your thoughts with us, please?
Yeah, sure. And thank you, firstly, for having us along for this discussion. I am not going to share any slides because what the main slide we've got is this one behind me. And I want to actually talk through that because we are a team of academics, we're also a technology team. So agriculture and technology go hand in hand and will do in the future. So the next generation of farmers will actually be scientists, data scientists, and technologists using autonomous drone vehicles, and all that will actually gather data. And we have put this into 4 pillars. So if you see up here is a edge cloud platform, which we have actually designed. So if you think of cloud data, so cloud is a great big warehouse with a load of servers in there, and it stores data. Edge cloud, which is growing rapidly, it's a 20 to 30 billion industry growing. And so edge cloud actually reduces the latency of data storage. It also allows for the facility of IoT data and, as Chris was saying, blockchain technology. Now, one of the processes that I first started off many, many years ago is blockchain technology. What is blockchain? And to be very simple, not overcomplicating it, blockchain technology is a database with no delete button. That is all it is. So when we look at that, we can geotag and geolocate any crop, any produce that is either harvested, grown, or caught, as in fish or within meat products, and it is all put onto the blockchain database. And with a QR, you can find out the time it was planted, what fertilizers it was grown in, and also the geolocation where it was, and what we call field to fork. So actually tracking it from when it was first grown all the way through to the supermarket shelf, and reverse engineer that for the recycling of any packaging that's in there. And that is all stored on the blockchain. So the farmer will actually quite simplistically document the first seed going in the ground. That is block number 1. Block number 2 is when it is placed with fertilizer or any other additives, or even the watering process. Block number 3 is when it's harvested. Block number 4 is when it's taken to the processing plant. So, and each block is connected and interlinked, which is where the chain of blockchain actually comes from. So you've got your block number 1, block number 2, block number 3, block number 4, and so on and so on. You can have multiple thousands of blocks. And each one is actually linked via a chain. And that's where the terminology blockchain actually comes from. So we have gone through all this process. And we have actually discovered that India, Thailand, Philippines, Malaysia, UK, America, farming is very, very similar. If we was to look at rice production in India, rice production in Thailand, in Philippines, in Malaysia, it is all the same. And farmers have a major issue, and that is one of very similar to here. So we all know what crypto is, cryptography. Let's take ourselves away from cryptography for a moment and look at what a digital voucher would actually look like. And so farmers actually struggle to access funds. And that is purely because they're in rural locations. Very few have credit histories, very few have, past applications and so on, but they don't need money. Farmers around the world don't need money. They actually need access to money. That is hugely, hugely different. And by tokenizing the actual ecosystem, you can actually give them a token that they can only then spend on fertilizer, on seed, on tractors, on hardware. That you can only exchange these in specific locations. So it removes the misspending, it removes the fraud element. And with it being on a blockchain, everything is transparent. So if a farmer receives 1,000 tokens and fertilizer is 10 tokens and seed is 30 tokens, they actually document all this every time the transaction is done. So it removes the fraud element. So we then go down to the bottom over there, if my finger's picking it up. Yes, there we go. This is all recorded very simplistically on a mobile phone device. So we all now have our mobile phone devices, and this is all we need. So we need to educate our next generation of farmers that they can do all this via a phone application. And we have actually discovered that places like Thailand, that people have an average of 2.3 mobile devices. In Ghana, for example, people have 1.5 mobile devices. And this is an average. So we know no matter where we are looking at this in the world, we can actually do this through edge cloud computing, which is up here. Now, going to our next process, and the last one, which is down here, which is agrivoltaic, or to the layman, solar. Now, if you've got an acre of land and we actually raise the panels 3 to 4 meters above the ground, so a tractor can still drive between 1 acre of land can actually become between 8 and 10 acres of growing land that we can actually utilize. And by creating the shade canopy of the solar, the farmer actually generates revenue all year round from the solar, selling back to the grid, and also powering the cloud, but are also creating more yield productivity. So the farmer that's for the last 50 years, it's always grew rice twice a year, 3 times a year, depends on the climate, can now actually grow various other products using agrivoltaic, aquaponics, photoponics that can actually grow greens. 80% of land produce can actually be grown vertically stacked. So we, just to close my statement, we are a technology company. Very much like Elon mentions that Tesla is a technology company that does cars. We are a technology company that actually looks at agriculture and smart villages and smart cities. And together with technology, with the future, as our slogan says, we will grow together. So thank you for listening to me. I'm Gary Spence from Yotta Laboratories. I'm the CEO and founder, and we are, more than welcome to answer any questions, but also we're looking for the key ideal partners who are looking at the future and where we can actually build the technology for tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation, Gary. We have a few questions. Let's take one, and then we move to the panel discussion, and we take more questions. So, who is Maynard and Rob, I think, and Sam? Sorry, you both have questions. Maynard, if you have your mic that works. Otherwise, okay, it doesn't work. Michael, do you want to translate repeat the question by Maynard?
Yes. Yes, of course. There is one interesting question. Just a moment, I get it because the question is whether there will be there is a lot of wasting. Just a moment, whether it's correct. Sorry, there are more questions, and I'm right now confused which one I should take.
Okay, just read, and in the meantime, I asked you to summarize his question. Sam Lanfranco.
So, wasting by the bodies, within the bodies, are wasting of the bodies, external bodies, crystals. I'm not too good in this. Sorry.
Okay.
I cannot
stop. No worries. No worries. Let's go to Sam Lanfranco. Sam, do you have your question? Do you want to ask your question?
Yes, thank you. As a farmer and someone who's dealt with microfinance and farmers, giving tokens to farmers is a bit of a problem, since they are, even if they're non-fungible, we can buy commodities, equipment, and sell it to our neighbors and monetize it. My experience is the major problem is access to financing at planting time and not being dependent upon our suppliers and borrowing from our suppliers. So I think that the non-fungible spending system has to be measured against a microcredit scheme in terms of evaluation. It's not a clear winner.
Just to answer your question, and we've actually been through this in India and also in ASEAN. So when a farmer, we geotag their location. So what we do is we actually geotag their land from the actual coordinates. So we can actually plot that they've got 1 acre, 100 acres, 1,000 acres. And also look at the soil analysis and the IoT big data that comes off that, and actually recommend what can actually be the best yield for that land that will actually give the farmer the best ROI. What that then does is the algorithm that says you need X amount of seed, X amount of fertilizer, so many vehicles, understand what's already there and provide the token then they can use within the ecosystem. So this is about reducing the requirement for a farmer to actually have a credit history, but as long as they've got the land and the process to do it, then the system actually accredits for that. And this is where organizations like UNICEF and IFCO and GRIFCO in India actually are favoring going forward. So people aren't given actual fiat currency, they're given a digital voucher to be able to process.
Happy with
And
the question, Sam?
The digital voucher is denominated in the fiat currency.
Yeah. So whether it's a USD or a CAD, or whether it's a Thai baht or an Indian rupee, so it is a one-to-one fiat. So it would be one token to one USD, for example. And so, yes, there is a monetary value to it, but the actual money is dealt with via the back end and not the front end.
So I assume Sam is okay?
Yes, I'm okay. Yeah, it's a targeted loan, basically.
All right, so let's move on. We have seen 4 stakeholders from different innovations in the space. Now I'm curious to know and to learn from each of them, but if all this is possible, how is it that we are so far from fixing the food industry? So which are the challenges that you met in each of your innovations? Who want to start? Yeah, go ahead.
I think one of the reasons why I was mentioning about the human capital side of it was because the fact that many of us, as I've been saying, innovation has been around. Innovation to propel sustainability and creating legacy. But the problem is that many of us are still not understanding the innovation itself, or may not have understood the benefit for what it is. So we're living in a world where we call it business as unusual moment. So if you and I and many of us can see the benefit for whatever the technology that people are talking about it in terms of creating water or water stress or water footprint issues or fertilizer, my point is to many of us is, why can we not have from plate to farm, farm to plate? A full regenerative agriculture that we talk about. So if you and I can understand what is regenerative agriculture is, then the opportunity of curbing the greenhouse gas, the landfill stress, and spending money on tons of money for nothing can be saved. And we can have a better wasteless life as what we want our future generation to have. That's where I feel that we need a bigger platform, and more people are understanding it. And I think what you're doing, Laura, is a fantastic opportunity for us to showcase what we're doing and for other people to say or for other people to learn. Thank you.
Thanks for your view, Zach. What do the others say? And then we move to the questions that are still to be answered in the chat. Who want to say the word? Adriano, Gary,
yes,
and
I think that
Chris.
Making the agri-food system more efficient and more cleaner means finding mutual utility between the agri-food company and agriculture. and this is what maybe lacks. We have demonstrated by our experience that agriculture can exploit what is considered a waste for food production industry, like scraps or wastewater. We can exploit the matter, the organic matter and nutrients, okay, from these waste. And agriculture, through agrivoltaic, can also generate clean energy for the food industry. This is like an example. And our land is more than a food producer. So if we consider these, like the agriculture processes works, thanks to the resources generated by the land itself, maybe this could be a good start point for the change.
Who else as a point of view? Adriano, thank you. I love the vision. Our land is more than a food producer. It speaks to those who look at multiple revenue sources. Okay, Chris, do you have your? Do you want to share your challenges?
Sure. I think today what we see is that the food industry is pretty siloed in the way that it works. And most steps today prioritize different characteristics that are not necessarily connected to sustainability. So at the farm level today, farmers do a great job within what they can do to promote soil health and these different things. But at the end of the day, they're paid for yield. So it's the production volume, not necessarily the quality and the characteristics that they get paid for. And we see the same things happening through the entire supply chain. So if you're a food processing company, typically you're producing a certain product at the lowest possible price. So the incentives to drive sustainable production are not translating across the supply chain. And because those different pieces are siloed, we don't see that value coming across the whole chain. So what we've been looking at from Theory Mesh is how can we recreate some of those connections and give people that traceability through the whole supply chain to see how quality applies at all the different steps. And quality here is nutritional quality, testing quality, sustainability qualities, food quality in general, and promote the value at each of the stages of production. So we'll need to make sure that we can see those different steps, and ultimately consumers need to make the choice to buy food that is more sustainable. It doesn't make sense to be buying food that's not sustainable if you care about the environment, and targeting food waste and all those different things is going to be an important piece. But being able to connect it across the silos that exist today is really an important piece, and that's what we're looking to help transform.
Thanks, Chris. Who has any objections to what Chris said? Come on, be courageous, guys. Okay, so who is next? You? Okay, bye. Go ahead.
Okay, so for us and technology, the biggest challenge is change. And this is, we have been to multiple countries. We work very closely with the UK Department of International Trade. And we are talking about autonomous tractors. We're talking about autonomous crop sprayers with IoT devices that will actually analyze soil. And a lot of the times we are talking to people who are actually still using a plow from the 1800s being pulled by a buffalo. And this is where across places like India, ASEAN, and very rural locations where the vast majority of rice and tea comes from, it's about introducing the change to the next generation of people. And one of the big challenges is we need to educate people in such a way that it actually becomes normality. So if we look at the pandemic, the pandemic actually did a lot of positives, if I can put it that way, in the technology industry, because people are doing what we are doing today, is doing Zoom. They are doing online communication. They're working from online and so on. But we are also looking at the next generation of farmer who will actually be somebody using a tablet to record what they're doing. And we need to educate, but we need to educate the teachers now for our next generation of farmers and producers. And one of the highlights is the places like Singapore, which grows very, very little produce, imports most of its food, was actually down to about 45 days before it actually ran out of food. Now, bearing in mind, Singapore is a very rich country, and they were at a key critical stage of food imports when the height of the pandemic was. So the actual supply chain that Chris keeps mentioning is very fragile, is very broken, very fragmented, and we need to actually bring the jigsaw together and everybody work collectively. Now, blockchain technology is also called distributed ledger technology. And if we focus on the distributed bit, this is where we need to be. Everybody within a supply chain needs to actually come together to make it all work. And that's going to be a long-lasting challenge of getting everybody from the crop producer to the beef farmer to the pig farmer to the actual abattoirs and everything to work together. And that is a big challenge.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. The cultural aspect on the time frame that these processes require for bringing everyone and collaborating actively in the ecosystem is a key element. So we'll have another 10 minutes. Do you want to spend these 10 minutes with, is there any burning question from the audience? And then I will invite everyone to join the sustainable production tribe to continue the conversation. But now that we are live, is there any one of you participants who wanted to raise their hand and ask their question live now? If you're shy, we go ahead with the panel and we see what they want to lead. Working collectively requires peaceful cooperative agreement across all regions. Ryan, do you want to raise, switch on your?
Yeah, sure. So really, I'm kind of listening to this and I'm looking at this from a local level. I'm not looking at this as an industrial thing. And I hear all the discussions. I understand the problems at an industrial level, but we've got political considerations. I'm Ukrainian, not by birth, but by heritage. And as a Ukrainian Canadian, I look at the Holodomor, where collective cooperation was used to really create a genocide that has destroyed a lot of families. Also, looking at it globally, and I will say that my background is computer science, bioinformatics, as well as engineering. So I understand the technical stuff, and we're trying to solve big problems with technologies, but we've forgotten that the food deserts exist, especially where I live in Canada, because we don't produce food all year round. We don't produce it locally. We don't produce it using methods that support soil and sustainability. And finally, we really don't understand what the definition of sustainability is. What does sustainability mean? So if there's a problem in the food system somewhere, it ripple effects across the food system, which is what the pandemic has shown us. That if there's a war in Russia and Ukraine, we're looking in November of problems in Africa. If there's a flood in Asia or hurricanes in the Southeast United States, we've got big problems. How do we insulate against that in the future for every region and not just at a global level? Because I think that's really the problem. And I'm not saying I have the answers, but I'm not really seeing any discussion on that here.
Well, that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I think Ryan, you've hit on, the end state that we want to get to in the food system, where, you've got the right incentives for the majority of food production to be local, and anything that can't be produced locally has got some efficient way to make it available to people where needed. Some of the technology that's coming, vertical farming, controlled environment agriculture, will help with some of the locality pieces of that. But I think the number one issue today is that we don't have visibility into all the things that are happening in the food system from the farm to the consumer. If we think about, big food companies, they're probably the only ones that know everything that they source, where it comes from and where it goes and what the footprint of that is. But the farmers that produce it don't, the consumers that actually buy it don't. And that's a major challenge. If we think about this comment on sustainability, there are many definitions and no definitions at the same time of sustainability, and competing things like regenerative that are coming in there. But I think what we do is we take a step today to try to solve for the things that we can and the things that we know. And what we've sort of focused on is that data traceability, to be able to encourage good practices without trying to boil the ocean altogether. So I think it's a long journey. But I've talked to a lot of people who've said it's not a journey worth making, which is interesting, because I think for sustainability, we have to start on the journey. We have to start making changes where we can. And for me, that really starts with transparency and traceability. But it's an evolving space. So everything you've said is very legitimate, and we don't have answers to all the things that you've raised. So it's going to be a journey for everybody together.
Just to interject with what Chris is saying, from what we need to understand is people need to become realistic. Now, when I was growing up in the UK, the strawberry season was between the end of May through to possibly July. Just after Wimbledon, you would struggle to get strawberries in the supermarket. We now have this mentality that if we go to the supermarket any time of the year, we expect seasonal products to be there. And this is a mentality that is quite dangerous and we need to get away from. There's big supply chain organizations, the big supermarkets have actually put into people's minds that you can, if you want strawberries on Christmas Day, you can have strawberries on Christmas Day. In reality, it's not physically possible in the UK to buy strawberries freshly grown in December. Doesn't exist because you just can't grow them. And we need to actually focus ourselves. If we want to truly be sustainable, we need seasonal food products and to have that mentality, and to educate people that is, you know, our ecology. Some things just cannot physically be done unless we start importing them, you know, pineapples from Thailand in November, for example. And that one pineapple has traveled 9,000 miles on a container ship and so on. And we've just got to look at sustainability and start growing more locally and not depending on imports all the time. It is my logic.
For sure. Thank you. Thank you very much. We have 3 minutes. Who wanted to go first with some thoughts to leave to our audience? Adriano, you were quite
yes.
quiet. Do you want to start?
To answer to a Ryan question that asked me if we are implementing permaculture in our design. And the answer is not, and this is the key, because the way we cultivate does not fit into any scheme. So we do all this by choosing the best techniques, regardless of the labels. So maybe sometimes we don't use pesticides as organic production. We sometimes use satellite images to monitor the crop health as the 4.0 agriculture, and we can grow environmental field margin, as you can see, for biodiversity and carbon sequestration, like is done in permaculture. So we just do the best practice with a scientific and long-term vision, and I think this is the key.
Thank you. Thank you, Adriano. Let's go ahead. Who wants to close the session with some positive message for the future, guys? Chris.
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, sure.
Okay. To me, and I'm quite sure there are many people who are from the farm as a farmers. To me, farming is an investment. And whatever what you sow is what you reap, as they say. And I go back to what Ryan mentioned before, and he mentioned about the part of the world that he came from. As a farmer, most of us, and all of us, we are looking at the operating costs. Fertilizer is one of the major operating costs. So with the cost of fertilizer going up, that has a direct impact on our food. And what is a fertilizer? What is the organic fertilizer? What is an ideal fertilizer? Well, basically, they call it NPK, nitrogen, potassium, phosphate. So if those items is already found in the food waste that's coming out from the farm, why not put them back again as a part of regenerative agriculture best practices? So if many of us, if we can understand and if we can break it down, the meaning of the regenerative agriculture best practice, there's an opportunity by which we can create more women empowerment. We can create more opportunity for growing food, and we'll have a better food to eat, especially during the COVID-19, where we have realized, as somebody mentioned about COVID-19, that it has given us a great data. One of the biggest data that we have learned from COVID-19, if your body is good, if you have a good immune system, you're okay from COVID-19. So why not protect ourselves? Your body is your temple. Let's do it right. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zach. Chris, Gary, your thoughts for the audience?
Chris, you go first.
Thanks, Gary. So I look out and I see a lot of intent to change in what we see in consumers and consumer behavior. I think the one thing that we need to be able to do is allow consumers to actually see what's happening with their food and their food system. So going back to the comments on strawberries and making them available, if as a consumer I knew that it was 10 tons of carbon per strawberry that was being emitted by transporting it, and I was concerned about the environment, I would probably make the choice not to have that strawberry. And those are things that we need to make sure that consumers are aware of as they're looking at products. There was a comment on plant-based milks. Those are all things where consumers don't fully appreciate the impact of what those may be. They may be produced sustainably, but without having the data across the supply chain, it's impossible for a consumer to know. So there's a lot of consumer education we need to do. And as a community, we need to be making sure that we're thinking about that kind of traceability and transparency for consumers, so consumers can make a better decision to help save the planet.
Thanks a lot. So for closing, Gary,
Okay,
are
so
you all ready? Okay.
yeah,
Good.
I mean, I agree with a lot of the comments. For me, I'm quite passionate with the actual future, and I don't want to be showing my grandchildren a picture of a cow or a sheep or a pig in a book to say, when I was growing up, we had these. There is no reason whatsoever that we can't have beef in the future, we can't have lamb in the future, we can't have bacon in the future, and so on, so on, so on. It is all about being realistic. And, any dietitian will tell you that your diet is all about variation. If you're eating the same all the time, it is unhealthy. So, and just to close is that, we are all talking about this today passionately because we want the future to be exciting, the future to be brilliant, and we want there to be a future. And the more people like us are talking about it and spreading the word, then collectively we can do something about it. It's not down to governments, it's down to us as individuals to actually power the mindset. So if we, like Chris has said, if we stop buying strawberries because it's got a large digital footprint, then the suppliers will stop stocking them on the shelves in December because the supply chain's brilliant. Supply and demand. If there's no demand, there's no supply. And we need to, it's us as individuals that need to drive that demand so the suppliers do it efficiently and correctly.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, it's time to go. Anyway, I invite everyone to be part of the responsible production tribe and continue the conversation. From September, there will be a series of other events that will go back to the food supply chain and responsible production topics. So please follow us at TiiQu Talks. The event recording will be shared in the past events page on TiiQu. So, well, thank you very much to our fantastic speakers for their participations. I know that they are super busy and that taking the time to share their knowledge is so important to build that education and awareness that we need for a more sustainable future. Thank you very much to everyone for participating, and see you the next. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.